Jim, but not as we know it.
How dare you? Are you just talking to yourself?
Two, 1, 7.
It is 20 minutes to 4 p.m. on Thursday, the 16th of May, 2024. And you were listening to the BashCast. Coming up in this afternoon's BashCast, we discuss the long-short paradox of time and how it applies to sports betting. Tom figures out that he can still bet on Eurovision after he knows the result, but should he an exchange edge on the 8th place market in majors on golf that we can all play on? The good and the bad from goalscorer betting as Tom gets lucky, and we finish with a look at the charlatans at the Guardian and the anything but charlatans that are going to be at the SmartBash 2024. All of that and more coming up in the BashCast this afternoon. Most citizens live lives of such routine and drudgery and are so concerned about security that they cannot imagine how delicious uncertainty is. A gambler may have many periods of pain and frustration as he does exhilaration, but at least he knows he is alive. That's a quote from the author Andy Bayer, which I found on Simon Nott's blog, simonnott.co.uk. This was an interview with Alan Potts, a professional gambler who has decided that it is time to call it a day. Whether you agree with him or not, and you don't have to agree with him, you can still find the writing and the sentiment to be very interesting. And I quite like the quote, how delicious uncertainty is, but it defines my character. And I have to maybe be a little bit careful on this BashCast, because I think in the last one I upset some people. And honestly, I don't like it. It's not in my character to enjoy upsetting people. It maybe is in other people's characters. I don't know how the mushers and the losing tipsters of this world sleep at night, providing long-term negative expectation services. But for someone that provides long-term positive expectation services, and I still see some people go through a rough patch, don't like it when they are affected by it. And after the last BashCast, I had mentioned maybe a golfer that we had not put up on the site but was on the tracker and had won. In this BashCast, I was actually going to talk about a golfer I was on from the tracker, Ashley Bhatia, that we hadn't put up on the golf options. We hadn't sent out in the weekly golf value. But I'm not going to do that because I can now tell I have a responsibility, and I don't want anyone to get upset. And the feedback, the sarcasm from the last BashCast was good to hear on the last BashCast that a winning bet wasn't uploaded for technical reasons. Would it have been that difficult to send an email with tips out to members? Since joining last October, I've had 3 winners and £1,829 down on golf tips. I hear all the time that it will turn, but let's face it, these tips rarely even place. So I'm truly sorry that there is some negative emotion that's been brought into it. I can be someone that actually they say in psychology that the pain of losing is twice as much as the joy of winning, especially in sports betting. And I'm someone that can kind of nullify or mute a lot of the pain of losing. But I can appreciate that that not everybody is like this, right? And I don't like hearing that some people are experiencing some pain like this and don't necessarily think that uncertainty is as delicious. But just a couple of things on that. I personally think that the part about none of the golfers are placing just now is a little bit of, what is that? long short time paradox where, you know, if you're enjoying yourself, imagine that time that you went out to a music festival or a holiday with friends on the beach. Day just felt like it went by so quickly. Now think of the day before when you were packing to go on that holiday and it was kind of boring. That day felt like it went on forever because you were having fun. A little bit of the same in gambling. When you're winning, if it can feel like that'll never ever end. But those sensations tend to be in shorter time periods than when we're losing, which go on for longer time periods because we win more than we lose when we win. And so losing can sometimes feel like it will never, ever end. In terms of whether we think that golfers aren't even placing anymore, I did have a look, because sometimes when we think something like that, we can look at the data and prove one way or another if a thesis is true or not, in terms of the number of places that we're getting compared to the number of bets that we're putting down. We placed 582 bets in 2020, 63 placed. That was 10.8% of our bets placed, okay? 10.6% placed in 21, 8% placed in 22, 10.9% placed in 23. So far this year, 330 bets, 33 places, so 10% of bets have placed this year. It's in the same ballpark as it always has been for the last 5 years. What's happened this year, more so than other years, is we've had an unusual number of seconds. I don't know exactly what the distribution there is, but to be losing in May from the start of the year isn't unusual. In fact, we're down pretty much the same amount in May as we were last year, and last year ended okay with a few winners, but all of the winners were in the last end of the year. And it's a shame that they're not evenly distributed throughout the year. In fact, I saw the most interesting profit loss graph from somebody who was combining horses and golf, where for 8 months in a row, they'd made a lot of money. Let's just say the number of £1,000, because it's going to help us with this analysis. It wasn't that. Let's just say for 8 months in a row, they made £1,000 a month, every month. Okay? And for 8 months in a row, they lost. But when they lost, they were losing £300 to £400 a month. So they're net up like £7,000. But they're saying maybe they're getting close to thinking that this is the end now. Because it was 8 months of winning and 8 months of losing. And the 8 months of losing has been more painful than the 8 months of winning. Even though they've lost less than they've won. So they're net up. Imagine those months were jumbled up. Imagine it was win-loss, 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 win-loss. That would be so much easier to deal with psychologically, but because then your expectation comes in, whereas when you just go win, 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 and then lose, 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 I can understand why the losing thinks it will go on forever. And there's only so many times I can repeat the same things around variance, large scale numbers. I mean, in terms of golf betting, we could go the whole year and not make a profit. That could happen. And so what I would hope is that you got to the end of the year and you were negatively affected by that. And if you think you would bet on golf for a year and then be very upset at the end of it if you weren't in profit, then I would suggest it's not for you, because what's the point of getting yourself upset for some pounds ROI? It's great when you're winning, but if you only swing when you're winning and you don't when you're losing, you know. So look, I'll try and sort of knock it on the head and not talk too much about golfers that could have been, would have been. All I would say in terms of access to the tracker is that if you've got access to the tracker, you have access to more power than just the weekly golf value tips or the weekly options tips. I think this guy was going off the weekly options tips. Those are the ones that have not had that many winners compared to the previous periods of time of the same scale. The tracker is dynamic and live, so you can look at it at any time. And it is just basically highlighting golfers from targeted by smart money and syndicates and steamers, and with a little bit of extra each way place value added in. So there's a lot more benefit to looking at that, to looking what I'm put on. But it'll turn. Let's hope that it turns. I so nearly went with Rory in the US PGA And I even went to Betfred to go and bet on him, and then it turns out he was 10 places value, but 8 places at 7-1 just wasn't. So swapped him out for Sir Bryson and Xander. We will see how they do on Sunday. In terms of, I don't know, other betting, I'm going to do a little section on Double Delight Hat-Trick Heaven. Now, of course, I have to talk about footballers that you may or may not be on, and I may or may not be on, and there was definitely a big one recently that I wasn't on, and I think it's this might be a little bit easier to talk about without upsetting anyone. The other thing from the weekend we had was Eurovision. Eurovision is always fun. It's quite difficult to do anything about it on bookie bashing. We were toying with the idea of doing like this standalone each way tracker just to elicit the each way value. I heard that Switzerland were quite good each way value. I hadn't noticed myself, and I wasn't on them myself. What did I make Switzerland when I looked at them? I've got the EV list here, actually. Switzerland, I made, at top price, a whopping 105% EV. Compared to the value elsewhere, that wasn't great. It wasn't good enough. I did like France at 25-1. Considering a fair price for 4 places for them was 3.5, and you could get 25-1 on their winning, and so 4 places 1 to 5 odds, you're looking at 5-1 on the place. You're getting huge amounts of place value on them, and I quite liked that song. It was I don't know if you watched it. Was it Mon Amin or something like that? Yeah, it was good. It wasn't my typical favourite, but then if you're going to go into Eurovision looking for house, techno, trance, that kind of thing, it's just going to be all cheese balls, isn't it? The whole thing is just so cheesy. It's difficult to have any sort of respectable EDM music. So I like going for full-on cheesy French lover man music. Didn't really understand the Irish, to tell you the truth. It is what it is. I'm making myself old. When do you get to the period of time where you go, I just don't understand what the youth are doing with music anymore? But I think I've hit there. What's most interesting for me always is keeping an eye on the voting and the betting in play. So in Eurovision, you have 38 countries, and each has 58 votes. There's points to give out, and this is fairly straightforward, right? We know that the point system goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then skips to 10, and then skips to 12. There's no 9 or 11. So add all of those up, 12, 10, and 8 down to 1, and you get 58. Everyone's got 58 points. Very easy so far. You've got 38 countries, they all get a jury vote. And you've got 38 countries, and they all get a public vote. And all the other countries, the non-participating countries, also get that public vote. And then you've just got to remember to take out Netherlands, which is the part of the process where there's not much clarity on it, and you've got to make sure you're getting your assumptions right if you do that. And Netherlands got removed for some reason or other the day before the final. And knowing that the points were going to be removed or not resulted in you being able to work out whether you could bet on something with 100% certainty on the result or not. And that made things a little bit difficult, but always very interesting. So they removed them from the jury vote. So there were 37 countries with 58 points each. The jury vote came to 2,146, and it did. So we knew that, right? Now, the public vote is always the same plus one set of votes for the non-participating countries. So 2,146 plus 58 is 2,204. So there was a maximum of 2,204 votes. Except you needed to know that Netherlands weren't going to be included as well, because there may have been 39 countries in the public vote, and we weren't quite sure. Nobody turned around and said exactly what it was. Either way, though, with one vote to go, the camera was on, and it was on Croatia and Switzerland. It was like either Croatia or Switzerland's going to win this, right? And Croatia And every other country had been giving both votes. Switzerland were just the last vote to give. They'd had their jury vote. They were on 365. They had to overtake Croatia, who were on 547 to win the whole thing. So they needed to get like 178 points to tie and more to win. 178. Well, whether the Netherlands were in it or not, we knew that there were at least 226 points to come, because we can take the sum of all of the public votes and take them off 2,204, which equaled 226. So they're going to get a minimum of 226. And if the Netherlands were still in and getting a public vote, they were going to get 280 points. 280, right? 283. Just had that last bit in my head. Whichever way you look at it, right, they were going to get over the 180 that was necessary to win. So they were going to get a minimum of 188. In fact, they got the 226, so they finished on 591. They won it by 44 points. And what was interesting is you could still bet in play at that point in time. You could still bet in play at the exchanges where there was money available to back. And I think a lot of people are doing some trading and they're trying to sort of manage their position right at the end. And often I think that right at the end of these types of things, it's just people trying to like manage their books, and there is money to be made. Whether you should do that or not, I'll leave it up to you. You are kind of betting on something where you figured out the outcome before the other person. This is slightly different to court-siding. I think this is where you've used your mathematical brain a little bit sharper than somebody else. And so there's not a clear-cut moral ground here. You might argue that, well, you are betting on something where you know the outcome. And the other person should know the outcome, but they haven't worked it out as fast as you. I don't know. I'm going to stay clear of this one. What do you think? Do you think you should be betting on that or not? I don't know. But that was Eurovision from the weekend. And I'm sort of, every year as it goes by, I'm just sort of sharpening up these ideas and these models, and then we're going to get to next year and they're just going to change the whole voting and jury and public system then anyway, aren't they? And then the whole thing is scrapped and you're back to base one. So that was the second bit of interesting news from the weekend. And then the third bit, I just found this interesting. The third bit of small chat from the weekend was that we came up with a horse racing tracker many, many, many years ago, where we devised a system of estimating the place probability and then recommended you go and bet on them either in singles or multiples. And many, many years later, some other communities decided that this was quite profitable, and so they wanted to do it. Now, in this time, we'd actually released a new tracker. We had better logic that we'd learned from doing the first one for so long, and we had faster feeds. So two things there, better logic and faster feeds. We were removing outliers, lessons learned over time. At the time, we kind of called it version 1 and OH. OH stands for Oddshawk, which is the name of the company that gave us the faster feeds, right? But we realized over time that people didn't really understand what the acronym OH stood for, or what the difference between the two trackers was, or why we even had two trackers in the first place. The reason we had two trackers live at the same time is that if one went down, the other would still be live. They were both still profitable, even if they showed different horses. One horse could be negative EV on one and positive EV on another, but in a large data set, they were all still profitable. Both trackers were. And it's a funny thing about horse racing. There's no right or wrong answer. There's just being profitable over 1,000 bets and not profitable over 1,000 bets. And two different systems can have a horse positive EV and negative EV and both be right for that goal of being profitable over 1,000 bets. So we renamed it anyway, from like version 1 and OH, which didn't really make any sense. We don't want to suffer from being in the redundant acronym club, or as I call it, the RAC. And we renamed them, the first one Basic. It's not really Basic, it's just the first version, and the second one Pro, because it was the second version, Professional. Kind of like, you can still use the Basic and you're not really losing out on much ROI and you're not being basic, but that's what we called it. And then many, many moons later, and the community came along and they released the Outplayed Pro horse racing tracker, the Pro horse racing tracker. Just found it amusing that they had to pick the name Pro. I mean, we sort of went through a number of different iterations of what we should call it before settling on Basic and Pro. But no, apparently the Pro is the name. And why is the Pro the name? Because now you can go to OddsMonkey and bet on the OddsMonkey Pro horse racing tracker. Good on you guys. Well done. Well done for coming up with a completely unique idea and unique name. Big up yourselves. So whilst I'm not going to talk too much about the golfers that I was on that won, let's talk about what I have been on. Do you know what as well? Just before what I have been on, which is quite a few golfers, quite a lot of footballers and some horse racing. And the footballers, we're going to talk about Mateta. Let's talk about Mateta in a second. I was messing around with the US PGA, which has just started just now. And here's a kind of free edge where you have to paint in the missing part of the puzzle for yourself, or just use the off-the-shelf piece of the puzzle that I'm going to give you here, but I think it can be improved, and I'd be interested on how you would improve it. And if you've got any ideas, I'm sharing this with you so you can go away and do it in the next major, because I think it's the kind of thing that only works in majors, so we've only got 4 of these a year. And also it's the kind of thing that works with a Betfair account, of which I don't have one. So I was doing this as more of an academic exercise. But I'll tell you this, I would have whacked down the better part of $1,000 if I had a Betfair account. I could do this because I couldn't get on Smarkets. This requires a top 8 market, you see. So let me talk you through this methodology. We can estimate a pretty good price of the win price. Now, there's 101 different ways of doing this. You can come up with your own way of pricing the field. You can come up with Data Golf. You can use Betfair. Now, if you were using Betfair to bet win only, then you might argue, well, why would I use Betfair as the barometer of what a win only price is? Because then surely I'm thinking that I'm using 100% strategy over time. And my answer to that is, well, you can use it if everything is relative. And by relative, I mean if you're comparing Betfair prices to Betfair prices to Betfair prices to find value at Betfair, then you can use it. You just have to be aware of what's the more efficient line and what's the lesser efficient line, okay? Right, so on that assumption, we have a number of different markets. Win, top 5, top 10 are quite common. In the majors, top 20, and Betfair have a top 8. Markets don't, Betfair do. Why would Betfair have a top 8 market? We'll come to that. Breaking down the mathematics of this, we can maybe assume that the more liquid and the more money that's traded in a market, the more reliable it is. Okay, the more, we can sort of have confidence in the market. So if we have a look at those markets, we've got, let's strip away top 20. So let's just look at the main top 3. I want to look at win, top 5 and top 10. Okay. So if we have a look at the win on the USPGA, we can see that 3.7 million has been traded. Top 5, 144,000. Top 10, 212,000. Top 8, 81,000. Okay? So the order is, in terms of the amount traded, win, top 10, top 5, and then top 8. Now, that means that the most amount of confidence that we have is in the win if we want to go down that route. And you get less confidence as you go to 10, 5, and 8. Now, you can turn the win prices into probabilities quite easily. Just be wary of the guys that are over 1,000 or over. The problem at Betfair is the maximum odds you can bet on is 1,000. If something is 10,000 to 1, it's very likely that they may have been traded at 1,000 because you can't go higher than that. Does that mean that they are 0.1% probability to win? No. It means that they're 0.1% or less, and in all honesty, it's probably less, because what are the odds that it would be exactly 0.1%? Be very careful with anyone 1,000 or over. But less than 1,000, we can work out the win. You just take the reciprocal of it. Anyone that's 100 to 1 is 1 to 100, 0.01 probability. We can take the top 5. Now let's do this with an actual example. shall we? So let's use Scotty Scheffler. Scotty Scheffler is, in fact, let's use Wyndham Clark because his numbers are easy. Wyndham Clark was 50.0 to win. That makes 2%. 1 divided by 50 is 0.02. So 2% on the win. He's 11.5 for top 5, right? Which is roughly 10%. So 2% for win, 10% for top 5. And what that means is that if you add up first, second, third, fourth, and fifth, you need to get to 10%, right? And you can weight it slightly towards he's maybe more likely to win than he is to finish in fifth if you think that, but the sum of those 5 numbers have to equal 10%. He's actually 11.5, so it's at 8.7%, but you can use an Excel spreadsheet to do this. So we can work out first, and we can work out second, third, fourth, fifth by just taking a subtraction of win from top 5 and dividing that by 4. So I've got the win at 2%, and I got second at 1.7%, third at 1.7%, fourth at 1.7%, fifth at 1.7%. Okay, you with me? I've now got my top 5 numbers, and I can do the same for 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, and 10th. It actually comes out again at 1.7%, so everything's adding up here. Everything's quite reliable here with Wyndham Clark. It's not exactly the same as 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th. What I'm doing here is I'm taking the top 5 price and I'm subtracting it from the top 10 price and dividing that equally between 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, and 10th. Now I've got my number for exactly 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, and 10th. Well, I can just add up 1st to 8th. And I've got my top 8 price. And it's quite a liquid, more efficient top 8 price than the top 8 price that's on the exchange. Why wouldn't they be the same? Why would the top 8 price on the exchange not be the same as this little analysis that we've done? Because if top 10's efficient and top 5's efficient and wins efficient, then it should be the same. And the answer's bias. And there is bias because if you look on OddsMonkey, I didn't mean OddsMonkey, forget that name. If you look on OddsChecker, you'll see the terms, the place terms from all the bookmakers for the USPGA. It reads Bet365, 8 places 1 to 5. Skybet, 8 places 1 to 5. Paddy Power, 8 places 1 to 5. William Hill, 8 places 1 to 5. 888 Sport, 8 places 1 to 5. Betfred Shops, 8 places 1 to 5. Betfair Sportsbook, 8 places 1 to 5. Do you get my drift here? Do you notice the pattern? Whilst there are 10 places, 12 places, 5 places, 6 places available, the majority are 8 places. So what's happening is our good friends, the arbitrage players, they are backing at each way, and then they are laying off the win and they are laying off the 8th place market so that they can guarantee a little bit of profit, and regardless of whether the golfer wins or loses. Wouldn't want to do it myself, but hey, live and let live. You do you, I'll do me. So there very well may be in this liquidity pool of £81,376 that's been traded more layers than backers, and they're not really that price sensitive. They'll just lay any price underneath what they've backed at, and that means that the prices are different, and so there's some bias in that market. And you can work out what the price should be based on that methodology that I just gave you. Now, what I did there is I split 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th equally. You might think that there is a player out there that is more likely to finish 2nd than he is 5th, right? So as long as 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus 5 plus 1 equals the top 5, you can split that any which way that you want to. And there are different analyses that you can actually do. You can work out if it's a polynomial regression or a quadratic regression or whatever, right? There are a few guys out there that are boom and bust, so they're either going to go for it or they're going to put it in the water and finish dead last. Those kind of guys. So you can work that out for any player. And is he as likely to finish 6th as 10th, or is he way more likely to finish 10th than 6th? Those kind of things, you know. Now, I've used what is known as a linear distribution, so I've just given exactly the same to 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th. What would you do? How would you do it? How would you split the probability between 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th? There is this thing called Occam's razor, where if whatever scheme you're devising is becoming so unnecessarily complicated, you're losing the overall picture, perhaps the easiest and best way of approaching this analysis is the most straightforward way. There is often utility in doing that. If you were to do that, and then you just divide the the odds available at Betfair by the odds that you now think are fair that came from Betfair in the first place. You can rank that, and that is essentially your EV, and you'll notice that most of the very high odds players appear at the top. Lucas Herbert, Naki Jim Jams, Thomas Detry, Sungay, but all of those guys are over like 500 to 1. You know, in this golf betting, it's great having these types of analyses, but if you're only going to get the winner once every 30 times, you're going to be waiting, 15 years before you actually get a winner. Really bad maths there by me. However, there were a few under 100 to 1. Satith Sigala looked like he was 110% on Betfair. You have to take out your commission after that, but if you're paying 2.5%, then, you know, the 10.5 that was going for Thigala looked like a great bet for top 8. Go and bet on it. Patrick Cantley, 6.8. Great bet. Jacqueline Neiman, 6.2. Live favourite. Great bet. Cam Young at 8. And Byung-Hun An at 8. At 9.8, sorry. So I'll tell you what we're going to do is just those guys. Let's actually make a little mark on my spreadsheet of who we've just said. We've said Byung-Hun An at 9.8. Cam Young at 8. Jacques Neiman at 6.2. These are all prices that were available just before the start of the tournament this morning on the Thursday. Patrick Cantley at 6.8. And Thigala at 10.5. Let's do some unit win staking to win 100 quid on each of those, hypothetically. And we'll come back to this in the next BashCast. I better actually write a note because I will definitely forget to do this. But if I go into my little BashCast note, then I won't forget. And we'll see how we did. Of course, all of them could come in the top 8. Does that mean that this is the greatest analyses ever? No, it means we got lucky. And none of them could come in the top 8 and we lose all of the money. Does that mean that this is the worst analyses ever? No, it'd just be a little interesting experiment. And the only thing, as I say, that you might do differently is how you split those probabilities amongst the players, whether it's linear or not, like what I did. Go to golfers for top 8 and see how what did. My notes read now. Okay. Hey, this is going to be about the my shop betting, and I've somehow managed to go on for 12 or 13 minutes, and the dog looks like she needs out. So I'll tell you what. Let's have a quick break here, and we will carry on in the next part of the BashCast with some shop betting, specifically a man up front for Crystal Palace. So for those watching this simulcast, podcast, videocast, BashCast, the thing that was here is no longer here. It's called Lucky. She is new. She was born on the 29th of February. That is quite lucky. Lucky for me because I don't need to buy a birthday present now until 2028. That will do me. She was a gift to the kids. And also the pain of a missed opportunity and a missed bet with El Kaabi, Aston Villa versus Olympiacos. So damn that little thing there. She's in debt to me for quite some time. But yeah, we promised the kids, if they did well in their parents' evening, that we would get them a puppy. And they did very well in the parents' evening. And I don't mind the company as well. So we ended up getting them this little puppy. Bloody parents' evening, by the way, whilst I'm here. Logistically very complicated because the two kids, one's at 4:30, one's at 6. And so we agree as a family, we'll all go to the 4:30. Kids can hang in the library in school. We'll all come home, and then my wife alone will go to the 6 one, and I'll stay with the kids, make dinner, do bath time, bedtime, and all of this nonsense. Because I'm at home and we're coming up to the weekend, I'm going to sort of imbibe in some of these psilocybin mushrooms that I've been cultivating. If you look over at these American podcasts, your Huberman, your Chris Williamson, a lot of, these wellness experts and productivity experts. It's very good for your efficiency, your long-term and short-term mental health and happiness levels, as well as just being able to focus, be creative, things like that. So a lot of them are doing them over in America. I think drinking is a lot more common as a sort of pastime over in this country. But these psilocybin mushrooms are better for you than that, so hopefully they take off. So yeah, I've been cultivating them. They are available in, well, they're the same chemical. It's in antidepressants. Now, I'm lucky enough that I've never really had to take antidepressants, but they just happen to be related to the same areas of brain function. If you take too much of them, of course, you might get a little bit colourful. Things might get a little bit strange. You might start chatting to God. That's, of course, if you're irresponsible and you take a little bit too much. As it happened, it was a very good parents' evening, and it was coming to the weekend, so I decided I was going to be irresponsible and not microdose, but maybe macrodose, and ended up regretting it instantly, because we then had another family decision that at 6 o'clock we were all going to go back to the school, because in fact some of the kids' friends were there and they were going to enjoy hanging out with them, which would have been great had I not made the decision, of course, to just maybe go a little bit big on these psilocybin mushrooms. And so ended up having to go back to the school, into the classroom, and it was already challenging enough. I just didn't need the full-size skeleton that was in the corner of the room behind the teacher to start talking to me throughout the 10-minute parents' evening. That wasn't that useful. Had to ignore him, as desperately trying to get my attention, and the whole thing I found a little bit more challenging than it should be. But more so than that, we still got lucky as a reward for the kids, and so I'm going down to the breeder's house, down the motorway, an hour and a half there, an hour and a half there, 3 hours, on the 2nd of May 2024. At the same time, Aston Villa are preparing for Olympiacos. Team news has come through, but the team news has not fed through our API yet, because our provider can sometimes be a little bit slow. Now, you can assign these manually, but my runner that was out and about, it was just a bit fiddly to do on his mobile phone, wanted me to do it. I couldn't do it because I was driving. There was a third member of our team who happens to be at pains to say that not only were they passing a Betfred, but had a significant amount of cash on them, by which they mean if there was big value, we would have been lumping in Bigsville. But unfortunately, he also wasn't in the position where he could manually assign the teams, and the team news hadn't come through, and I couldn't do anything about it. So we skipped the game. Now, DDHH is one of those things. It's like such a long-term game. Like, if you look at the graph, if you just look at the overall ROI, everything is fine. Everything's in expectation. 14.48% ROI, over 600 tracked bets, nearly 700. But the last 200, which is going back a year, have been break-even, losing. In fact, in 2024, it's been quite another dry year. Since the beginning of the year, we had a couple late at the end of last year, with Mavdidi getting double delight and Nunes, but in 2024, only really Cyril Cesses, by the way, he was the thinnest of thin at 7-2. And then Vinicius for Real Madrid have come in all of 2024, until we get to the 2nd of May. So you'd be forgiven if it's something that falls off your radar. You know, it's just very, very long periods either without value. And that's what I hear a lot of the time. There's just no value. Well, there is. It's just you gotta be patient and wait for it. And I often miss it. And I am often on it. And this year, if I've been on it, it hasn't been winning, and that's the nature of the game. And we just couldn't look at the track at this particular time. And if we had, and after team news had come through in this narrow window, or we had applied the team news ourselves at this particular time at 7 o'clock on a Thursday evening, we would have seen that Olympiacos was set up in such a fashion that the markets hadn't recognised who was starting. And there were way too big prices for all of the Olympiacos players, especially Ayoub El Kaabi, who was starting up front by himself and was 10-1 double delight hat-trick heaven. That's 11.0. Neutral odds on him would have been 9.46. He's a big, big bet. I couldn't see it. I wasn't on him. Neither were any of my runners. And what happens with El Kaabi? He gets his hat-trick heaven at 10-1. That's a payout of 30-1 from Betfred. By the way, in the reverse leg, so that was Villa Olympiacos. The Olympiacos Villa, he also got first goal scorer in that match as well. 10-1 was an unbelievable price for him in double delight hat-trick heaven. And I wasn't on him. And I could have been on him had I been able to focus. But here's the thing. I wasn't able to focus. And this harks back to the missed golfer and the missed opportunities, it's okay. Even if it takes me another year, it's okay. Because you always remember the guys that won that you weren't on. And you always forget the guys that lost that you were not on. If that makes sense. So, still, El Kaabi, he will go down in history as one of those guys. Fortunately, a couple of weeks later, Haaland and Kaabi, but Haaland was very decent value 9-4 against Tottenham in a match which was 48.0 to be 0-0. If you want to hear more about why I'm talking about that, go and have a look at latest news, where we look at the highest prices for 0-0 over the last couple of seasons. But 9-4 was a decent price for Haaland, and he got the first goal and he got a second goal. So if you want to work it out in your head, how the double delight works, just half the lower part of the fraction. So 9-4, half it, you get paid out at 9-2. And if he gets another one, then you third it, and now you're in trouble. You're at 9-1.33. Good luck with that. So on the 2+, that's one that I wasn't on, but one that I was on is just keeping an eye on the 2+ and 3+ after, especially, I mean, there's value there before team news, but then you've got that uncertainty of team news and a little bit in your head going, is this value because someone knows more than me around team news, or is this value just because I know more than them? Always a difficult question to answer, but at least after team news, we're both working off the same team sheets and him sheets. And 2+ and 3+ can be a very interesting edge to have, simply because we're generally betting it, betting at 10-1 or higher, sometimes 30-1, 40-1, 50-1. And imagine you're spinning a roulette wheel and you're getting 50-1 on what is a 35-1 shot. You can imagine that you can go really long periods of time without making any money. If you do 10,000 spins, you're going to be up. But how it's the same kind of with these 2+ and 3+. It's really long periods of time betting at these levels of odds. I mean, the average 2+ in a game can be 500-1. I know this because I just looked it up. But Sunday, the 21st of April, 2024 came around. Crystal Palace were playing West Ham United. And the guy with the most XG in the whole game, with an XG of 0.3811, is Jean-Philippe Mateta. And his 2+ at on the exchanges at 18.5 was a decent price because he was 15.6 Pharaohs. I mean, imagine you're betting on a horse at 18.5. I don't know why it seems like it's more value as a horse, but in this game, Crystal Palace got 5 goals, 3 in the first half. Elise, Eze and Emerson. So they were actually 3-0 up before Mateta got his goal. And that was the 4-0. And that was in the 31st minute. So we now have 60 minutes of football to get that second goal. He got it in the 64th minute. And that's Jean Mateta coming in there at a very decent 120% EV. And then in the very next match against Newcastle United, Mateta is now the second highest XG in the game. Isaac is highest at 0.49 because Newcastle tend to play him up there by himself, but Mateta was second at 0.40. His 2+ on the exchange was 16.5. 14.28 would be your 2+ with an XG of 0.401. And 0-0 at half time, but Crystal Palace did beat Newcastle 2-0. Mateta got both goals, the second goal being in the 88th minute. Despite being a Newcastle fan, I was on that as well. And it's a bit like, you know, waiting for buses and then 2 14-1 Matetas come in at exactly the same time. So stick with it. Stick with the 2+, 3+. Not many tails. I tend to be on both 2+ and 3+ when I'm on the same player because they both tend to be value at exactly the same time. And it would be nice one day if the 3+ came in because then both bets trigger for me and I get kind of a double payout. That's the way I'm playing the game. But yeah. By the way, we've just had a look at the results for a lot of these players and also for the combo bet. So in terms of the players and the X180s and things like that, anything that's a tool, we are going to be sort of releasing all of the historical ROI compared to Betfair. It just takes forever getting hold of all of this Betfair data. And in terms of the combo bets, you know, it's such a weird thing. The performance between 100 and 110% EV is pretty poor, but then 110% and over. There are so many thousands and thousands of bets that are performing really well. So there's sort of a strategy that can be used there. And we've been looking at how we can sharpen up those mathematics, but that's our advice strategy on them anyway, would be certainly to be selective for the higher EV. The other things, of course, that we've been looking at, finally, some lucky 15s have started to roll in. Nothing huge. I'm betting 60 and 90 pound lucky 15s. And they've started being trickling in at 400, 500, 600 returns, but just a number in a row. And a bit the same with the coupons. Look, I've had no massive football coupon win, but now just a few in a row, especially like match odds and 2+ goals, match odds and 3+ goals, those kind of things. A few in a row just starting to trickle in, like 5, 6, 7, and they start chunking away at the slight negative figures that we've built up over the course of this season. So, I mean, at the end of the day, this is a difficult season for coupons. I'd set up that drama noise for earlier, but I'm using it now, even if it's in the wrong place. But if I get to the end of the season, break even, that's going to be a result. Having said that, actually, there is one more game in the Premiership, so we'll see if that happens or not. Okay, SmartBash and Media Chat. Oh, all you talk about is the SmartBash. Shut up. It's going to be great. I'm going to talk about it again. But first, I was sent a link the other day to The Guardian, revealed how fun social media accounts direct fans to betting giant. This is an expose on the Andy Robson Twitter account and FanWave Digital. And it reads in a very familiar flow to any particular BashCast listeners, starting off with a picture of Faroe Islands team B36 Torshavn, who Andy Robson strangely happens to sponsor. Moving on to some of the bets, and then FanWave Digital, and then the fact that it might be Paddy Power, and it's just the sequence of information just seems, I don't know. Did we get credit on the BashCast for episodes 212 and 213 for this story on The Guardian? No, we weren't referenced or gave credit at all. Does that matter? I guess the bigger picture here is, look, if you go back to 212 and 213, we spent some time breaking down the mathematics of giant Twitter tipster Andy Robson, who seems to churn out an unbelievable amount of content, none of which is providing long-term positive expectation bets. I couldn't find one, not a single one, not even one muddying the water accidentally among some negative ones, but we could prove that they were all bad. I mean, how do you do that? How do you have such a following? And so we proved it using mathematics, and after 212, invited FanWave Digital onto the podcast to defend themselves, because we're coming up here with objective, not subjective, objective, constructive criticism of the mathematics of their betting, and they're more than welcome to come along and tell us maybe where we went wrong, where we misunderstood. Instead, they submitted a defamation complaint to YouTube and had episode 213 taken down. So that just tells you everything. Now, I guess the important thing about this was getting widespread exposure on the practice, because the most important thing here is that Paddy Power Betfair are using their gigantic pockets to trick people into thinking that bad bets are profitable. And that is the problem with this. It's using these massive fan betting accounts to play a game of smoke and mirrors. It should be against advertising terms and conditions, and it will be one day. But a particular young man, a 32-year-old Scottish entrepreneur called Rory Kilgore, who's also director and co-owner of Wraith Rovers, has got astonishingly rich over this gap in legislation that we currently have. Well, good for him. It won't last forever. He knows that, which is why he submitted, or his company submitted, the defamation complaint to get my podcast taken down. So it's good that it had wider exposure on The Guardian, because the more people that know this, the more people that are aware of the story that can be linked to it, that might follow and fall for these bets on Twitter, the better. I suspect that the majority of his 900,000 or 1 million or 1.25 million followers that FanWave say they have are not aware of the Guardian article. They're certainly not aware of the BashCast. There's a danger that they continue. And the danger is that people are still being hoodwinked. There is something very immoral and not right about Betfair, Paddy Power, about betting giants using these accounts to frame bets as profitable. That's the whole issue with it. Is if through these bets they turn around and went, on average you would lose 10% of your capital over time, everything would be fine, no problem, we'd walk away. But that's the issue. Unfortunately, the Guardian article didn't have the same critical discussion around the problem with this. They highlighted that it was happening, but then went to Gambling with Lives, the campaign group, who said that nowhere is safe from relentless gambling advertising, especially social media, which can be torturous for people harmed. Football and betting have become so enshrined that what seems like a harmless fun account can be another way of making money for the gambling industry. There's a bit of whataboutery there. It's not really about harming people that have gambling problems. For the love of God, we need to help those people. But the overwhelming majority of people following FanWave don't have gambling problems. They're being hoodwinked. You know? It's a little bit like Morrison's or Tesco's having things for sale on a sale price all the way down to £2.50 when the RRP is actually £1.50. It shouldn't be £2.50 in the first place. And then someone sees this and they say, well, alcoholics are at danger of the alcohol on sale at Morrison's. And you're like, yes, they are, but that's nothing to do with the issue that you're getting hoodwinked over the prices. So the main story here, which was lost in the Guardian article, is the hoodwinking. And it will be interesting to see where we go from here. It sits very uneasy with me if this all just disappears, but I'm not entirely sure how it can get any bigger. Talking about how it can get any bigger, that's a great segue, isn't it? The SmartBash 2024 is progressing very well. We have ironed out the day. I don't know what it's like if you're listening thinking, well, what the hell is this event? That's because we've really come up with a sort of structure for the day behind the scenes, where we have, obviously, if you've heard me talk about this, we've hired a conference room at Chelsea. We are filling it primarily with very high profile people within our domain, within the professional gambling, within the betting domain. And we're going to have networking panel discussions. We're going to have presentations and speeches. We're going to have food and drink. And it's an opportunity to either turn up and see what's going on and have a great day, or turn up and nothing's going on, which ain't happening, and you walk away and what have you lost? A few hours of your time. But I wouldn't frame it like that. These networking events are always bigger than the sum of their individual parts. And we have a lot of people lined up for panels and speeches, but we are sort of keeping most of it under wraps for now. And I think Smart Betting Club announced the first 3 yesterday, and so we can talk about them. And it's going to be Nick Goff, Johnny Deneen, and Matt Trenhale. So Nick Goff has been a professional punter for 8 years after being head of football trading at Coral. He was at the Smart Bash last year. Knows his stuff better than anybody else. Very opinionated, very forthright, very interesting to listen to. Johnny Deneen is a former bookmaker turned pro punter, and one of the co-hosts of the very popular Upping the Ante Racing Post show from the Racing Post. Matt Trenhale, we've had him on the BashCast, has extensive experience in the betting industry, having held positions at renowned companies such as Mustard Bet and Pinnacle Sports, where he was most recently the head of growth. And we're going to start at about 9:30. We're going to have 10 or so panels and discussions with breaks in between, chats with the community that are there, I was going to say audience, but audience is the wrong word because I feel like it's not really people speaking and lecturing and people listening. It's more than that. It's an engaging day. Okay. And then we've got lunch, and then in the afternoon we've got more, and they're going to be different panels from things like cryptocurrency and betting to, you know, stories from the betting ring. I'm looking forward to chats about modelling and breaking down the mathematics that lie behind things like golf and football and stuff like that. Cryptocurrencies, betting exchanges, that kind of thing. And then afterwards, we've got drinks at a local bar sponsored by someone that I don't know if we've announced it yet who's sponsoring us, so I'm going to keep that under wraps. But the general framework of the whole day is coming along. We've sold quite a decent number of tickets as well. So I think the decision's being made that the ticket price is going to be going up, and the early bird time where we were allowing people to purchase tickets at the beginning for a slightly cheaper price is coming to an end. So if you want to get in at the current price today, which is the 16th of May 2024, of £99, today's the day to go and get the ticket. And at some point in the future, I'm not entirely sure of the actual date, but that price is going to rise because we believe that we need to sort of reflect more accurately the value of the ticket, which is way more than £99. So hopefully see you there. This is a shorter BashCast this week. For reasons of I'm still trying out the simulcast, videocast, BashCast format. The pupcast has disappeared. I was hoping she was going to last the whole hour, but no can do. Whatever it is that you're betting on this weekend, please make sure it's value. This is Tom, signing out.